From CPRE and the CPRE Knowledge Hub, this is Research Minutes, a weekly look at new and important research in education. Today we look at community college and a growing number of institutions that have begun offering bachelor's degrees in recent years.
The general takeaway is that community colleges are offering bachelor's degrees to address local workforce needs, whether those are shortages in education, nursing, business, information technology, so on and so forth.
According to a new study, however, those programs can have notable impacts on college tuition and fees.
What we found was when community colleges offered bachelor's degrees, they then went and increased their tuition and fees between 7.9% and 10.4%.
We welcome study co-author and University of Florida researcher Justin Ortagus, who joined CPRE Knowledge Hub managing editor Keith Heumiller to discuss his findings and some important implications for higher ed policy and future research.
I think this is one of the more understudied state policy issues in higher education research. And I just think in general, we don't know enough about the effects of community college baccalaureate programs.
That's right now on Research Minutes.
Hi, and welcome to Research Minutes. I'm Keith Heumiller, managing editor of the CPRE Knowledge Hub. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Justin Ortagus, assistant professor of higher education administration and policy and director of the Institute of Higher Education at the University of Florida College of Education. Thanks for joining us, Justin.
Thanks, Keith. I'm excited to talk with you. And again, thanks for having me on.
So today we're going to be discussing your new article, and it's co-authored with Northern Illinois University's Showdown Who, titled The Price of Mission Complexity, a national study of the impact of community college baccalaureate adoption on tuition and fees. It was recently published in Educational Researcher, and it offers a unique look at the changing face of community college education in the U.S. To start, could you just set the stage for us a little bit? When and how did community colleges start offering baccalaureate degrees?
Sure. Basically, in the late 1980s, West Virginia was the first state to authorize their community colleges to be able to offer bachelor's degrees. And what that looks like is a community college will need to request and then ultimately receive approval from the state to be able to offer the bachelor's degree. So this was something that happened in kind of a limited capacity during that time. But really, the movement took a little bit of a boost whenever you think about Senate Bill 1162 in the state of Florida. And that's really when a lot of the community colleges, which started with Florida's oldest community college at St. Petersburg Junior College, allowed their community colleges to offer bachelor's degrees. And really the logic behind that is trying to meet the local workforce demand and be responsive to the local community and economic needs. So once that took place and kind of got rolling, that's really what it looks like as far as the logic behind and the starting point for community colleges offering bachelor's degrees.
So I guess my next question would be why? Are there particular factors in the job market or among community colleges themselves that are driving this trend?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. And I think that's kind of a point of contention as far as whether it falls within the mission of community colleges and why they would kind of move in this area. The general takeaway is that community colleges are offering bachelor's degrees to address local workforce needs, whether those are shortages in education, nursing, business, information technology, so on and so forth. To give you a specific example, I'm in Gainesville, Florida at the University of Florida. And what was happening here locally is a lot of our students who were getting accounting degrees would kind of go elsewhere and they weren't staying in our local community. So we had a local shortage in accountants. So what happened was our local community college, which is now Santa Fe College, offered a Bachelor of Science in accounting to kind of directly meet that local workforce need. So this is kind of the general purpose, and I would say that's the main takeaway as far as why community colleges are offering bachelor's degrees.
I know that community colleges across the country and in varying communities have struggled in recent years with enrollment and declining funding and have been looking for new creative ways to try and address that. Do you think that there's a financial motive at play here at all?
I don't think we know enough empirically to say for sure that's what's taking place here. I do think anecdotally it makes sense from an economic perspective. If you think about just the logic of offering more degree programs, widening your prospective net for students who can enroll at your community college, it just kind of makes sense. And community colleges, as you know, are significantly underfunded, and they just don't receive the same level of public funding as their four-year institutions. So what happens there is you have to figure out ways to do more with less. And one kind of creative approach is this idea behind offering bachelor's degree programs at community colleges.
So what drove you to conduct this study in particular? Were there concerns among higher ed experts about CCB programs or questions that you felt needed to be addressed?
I do think there are definitely concerns for community college baccalaureate degree programs and thinking about the implications and the effects of those programs. The major concern that I hear typically when having conversations related to this topic is this idea behind mission drift. And the general concern is that if community colleges are offering bachelor's degrees, they may be moving away from their traditional mission of affordable, open access, sub-baccalaureate education. And by doing that, they're really kind of just duplicating what the 4 years are already doing. And that's a concern I definitely understand, and I can see the logic of that concern. But what I would say to that point is that community colleges have complex missions, and the idea behind serving local workforce need is a major component of the community college mission. So it's a complicated issue. So these are just things that I think we need to know more about what happens when community colleges offer bachelor's degrees. And as an aside, I'm just interested in general about this idea of unintended consequences of state policies. And that's kind of a motivating factor as well. So when my co-author, Justin Hu, and I were really wondering about this topic and talking through the logic of the study, we wanted to focus specifically on, whether the cost associated with kind of launching and maintaining these new bachelor's degree programs would then go and drive up tuition at, these community college baccalaureate adopting institutions. So that's what kind of led to our initial interest in this study.
And it doesn't sound like a very easy question to answer. Could you give us a general overview of how you approach this work?
I think one of the really nice benefits of this study is that it's a national study, and we're focusing on all community colleges that were offering bachelor's degrees during the time period of our study, which was roughly 2001 to 2014. And without getting too much into the weeds, as far as like how we approach this from a methodological perspective, we did something called a difference in differences approach. And just in general, what we did was we compared the tuition and fees of the community colleges that offered bachelor's degrees to multiple comparison groups, before and after the implementation of the policy. We compared the community colleges that offered bachelor's degrees to those community colleges in the same state that did not offer bachelor's degrees, those community colleges that were not offering bachelor's degrees in neighboring states, and then to really try and make sure that we're comparing otherwise similar institutions and not introducing a bunch of complications when making these claims, we used a matching technique to compare otherwise similar community colleges from around the nation with very similar characteristics to those community colleges offering bachelor's degrees, and then compare tuition and fees after that. So your initial point about it being complicated is well taken and kind of what we did find when trying to do this work.
So after all that work, what did you find? How have CCB programs impacted tuition and fees at those colleges compared to your comparison group?
What we found was when community colleges offered bachelor's degrees, they then went and increased their tuition and fees between 7.9% and 10.4%. And another kind of question we were interested in is quite often what happens is that these community colleges that are offering bachelor's degrees are only offering a single bachelor's degree or two, a very small number. So what we wanted to do was see what happens whenever we look at those community colleges offering a larger share of bachelor's degree programs at their institution. And what we found was that those tuition increases grew even larger when we focused on community colleges that offered at least 10% of their total degree programs as bachelor's degrees. And those percentages varied according to the comparison group, but the general takeaway was consistent and robust across our different models.
Significant findings. So we're obviously in an era when college costs from community colleges through graduate programs are a pressing concern for students and families, and for good reason. I'm curious, what do you think the implications are here? I'm sure it's not as simple as CCB programs lead to higher tuition fees, so they must be bad.
I really appreciate that question because I think you're exactly right. It's truly not that simple. And the last thing we want to do is come across as saying community college baccalaureates are bad because they can increase tuition and fees. I think a really important point here to talk a little bit about the nuance of these offerings is that a lot of community colleges, what they'll do is they'll charge different tuition for the lower division courses, typically their associate degree program courses, and the upper division courses. So we don't necessarily view increases that are restricted to bachelor's degree programs as problematic in nature. We understand the logic behind that it's going to be more expensive to launch those specific programs, especially when you think about the local 4 years are going to have a higher price option, so students can save money in the long run. We honestly think that's a positive outcome for those students. The reason this is complicated, and we would argue there are some also questions related to the effect of this policy on tuition, is whenever we restricted our analyses to focus specifically on those institutions that charge the same tuition and fees for all degree programs, whether that's associate degree or bachelor's degrees, we still saw effects and found that, tuition and fees would increase following the adoption of community college baccalaureate programs. So the big takeaway for us is it's not a simple issue. We think it absolutely benefits students in ways where if you are location constrained or you want to take a bachelor's degree program at your nearby community college, in general, it's going to be a lot less than the comparative 4-year degree program, and we think that's a major takeaway that needs to be clear. We would just argue that just increasing tuition across the board could be problematic for those students who are not in those specific community college baccalaureate degree programs.
Given the complexity of this issue, I can kind of guess your answer to this final question, but do you think there are opportunities here for future research, either for you or others who are working in higher ed?
I really do. And I think this is one of the more understudied state policy issues in higher education research. And I just think in general, we don't know enough about the effects of community college baccalaureate programs. And it's a growing area. Now there are 20 states and over 100 institutions. So this is something that really is ripe for further study. I do have some collaborative work that's kind of in the hopper with my colleague at University of Florida, Dennis Kramer, and one of our outstanding doctoral students, Jackie Donovan, where we're focusing on the effect of community college baccalaureates on kind of nearby bachelor's degree production and enrollment at 4-year universities and kind of seeing if there are some interesting competitive effects going on. And earlier you asked about the financial implications, and I do think that's something we're going to continue to focus on, not only me, but my colleague, Dr. Shut-On Hu at Northern Illinois. So there's plenty of opportunities for a lot of quantitative work. One thing I would like to add is I also think this area is really an interesting focus for folks who want to do qualitative work and learn more about what's happening in this space, to talk to policymakers, folks who are working at these community colleges offering bachelor's degrees, and really seek to better understand what's happening when these bachelor's degrees are offered at community colleges. And maybe more importantly, how can we leverage these learnings to think about how to optimize not only future practices related to this area, but also future policies at the state level and try to avoid some of these unintended consequences and make sure that when we're implementing these policies, we're doing so to the benefit of these students.
Well, Justin, this is just fascinating work, and I want to encourage all of our listeners who are interested in it to read the full article. Again, it's titled The Price of Mission Complexity, a National Study of the Impact of Community College Baccalaureate Adoption on Tuition and Fees, and that's been published in Educational Researcher. Justin Ortagus, thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you, Keith. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this week's Research Minutes, presented by the CPRE Knowledge Hub. To share thoughts on today's episode, or to suggest future topics, follow us on Twitter at CPRE Hub. That's CPRE Hub.